Morning, Speaker.
That's my bad. I forgot money here. What's up, Mark? No, I'm good. I think it's fun. So, at this point, I think it's my job to make it. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, it was great. How was school? Very good.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Somehow my kids decided that my wife needed a really good meal meant that I had to cook. Really don't know how this worked out. So we woke up and had a dinner the night before on Mother's Night, and we skipped church and did breakfast because we had all the kids there. And my wife was smart enough to know I could help her cook and then clean. You won't be cooking at all.
See, I got to work hamburgers and hot dogs yesterday.
Yeah.
So we had Jackson Connor over. Come on, Big Ed.
Good. Good.
Join the fun. That was
Yeah, that was. Mine did my in-laws get in today. So most of the weekend is legal.
Oh, that's the last. And this is through like the morning things. And you open the
That's a long time, my friend. We only use paper plates at our house. Yeah. My dad's that way. He has to use plates like for everything. We use paper plates, and sometimes we'll have friends over, and my wife will be kind of self-conscious about it. I'm like, babe, anybody get invited to our house? They're close enough. We're fine. They can eat on paper plates.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the media and friends from the House and the Senate, and back to our Budget Summit 2024. Applaud both chambers. Most transparent government in state history here. And thanks to the media for being here and covering this, and just a couple ground rules. Just like we've said before, this isn't a press conference, so the people on the sides, unless the speaker, myself, the pro tem calls on you, let's keep the discussion here at the table, and we'll be able to talk to the press afterwards. So the thing that I would like to really throw out in the very beginning is the revenue numbers. Yesterday, or excuse me, the last two times we've kind of got into going down the list of appropriated items, and the problem with going down the list before you talk about revenue is all these things sound great, and growing government and all the pressure that we have as a legislative body to increase spending for this or this or this or this. So you can't just keep growing government and then come to the bottom and say, oh, we don't have room for tax cuts. So we have to talk about revenue from the very beginning. Just a little bit of history. So in 2020, our expenses as a state, our appropriation was $9.1 billion. $9.1 billion. Last year, it was $12.9 billion. A 40% increase from 2020. On the revenue side, last year's revenue was $11 billion. That was the 100% number from the BOE. This year, the 100% number is $11.267 billion. That doesn't include, and I know we're getting in the weeds a little bit, we'll sweep about another $100 million into those numbers. So to say that we don't have room to give an income tax break to the poorest Oklahomans, I don't think we're being honest. I don't want to sit here and just keep growing government and going line by line without talking about an income tax cut. Mr. Speaker, will you talk about an income tax cut with your chamber?
Yes, we will. We'll once again take that up again. I'm sure
Mr. Pro Tem, will you vote on and take up with your chamber an income tax cut for the poorest Oklahomans?
We did on the grocery tax. We took a definitive step. We've taken steps over the last few years to make it much better for the poorest Oklahomans. In fact, during negotiations last year on school choice, of which you and I both supported adamantly, the Senate position was forcing it to the poorest Oklahomans against opposition from both you and the speaker on that issue. We ended up prevailing, putting caps on there and pushing it toward the poorest Oklahomans. So if this is a press conference, as you stated earlier, it was not. I think it's somewhat laughable that you look at the speaker and say, will you do one? That's obviously a setup just to make me look bad. But if you want to go through the numbers,
I want to go through the numbers because you didn't answer my question. Will you do a tax cut, an income tax cut for Oklahomans? Will you vote on it? That's a transparent process. Will the Senate vote on that when you put that up for a vote?
Governor, we have made our stance very clear. The fact that you say that we have grown government by that amount, first off, you take 2020, which we had to cut drastically because of COVID. We went to about 89% of our level. Secondly,
which one of my numbers was not correct, Pro Tem?
I'm not suggesting it's incorrect. I'm suggesting it's very misleading. I think you're aware of this. If you're not, I'll reiterate it. We pulled in the Oklahoma teacher retirement system, and we pulled in the roads fund for ODOT, which when combined adds $1.05 billion to our bottom line.
When was that pulled in?
When was that pulled in, gentlemen?
We've got 22.
TRS was FY23 and ODOT was FY22.
22 and 23 respectively.
Which one? How much was the 22 number?
The 22 would have been 590.
And the 23?
And 23 it was 401.9, and FY24 that grew to 460 million.
But the number's the same. If you want to back out, if you want to say that we didn't grow 12.9, that really 400 was baked in, it'd be 12.5. But the point is still the same. We have the revenue at $11.2 billion. That's our income. And we're proposing to spend $12.7 billion this year. I think that's what both chambers, and there's some investments that we can do, but being a part of just growing and just going line by line and increasing government doesn't seem like a good use of our time. If Oklahomans have not got a pay increase since 2020, inflation is hurting them, Pro Tem. And so why should government keep growing at 40%? Last year, we increased spending over $1 billion. That doesn't include ARPA and not even one time. That's just increasing spending. Education got over $700 million. Why can't we talk about a flat budget? I've been very clear. I've called 3 special sessions for tax cuts. At my State of the State this year, I talked about tax cuts, but we seem to.
And about 75 days ago, we delivered on the largest tax cut in state history.
The grocery tax, and I love that. That's great. That helped the poorest Oklahomans. That's fantastic. But it's not our money. It's the taxpayers' money.
But so you just admitted it helped the poorest Oklahomans.
That's right. That's one grocery tax. We're one of only 12 states that had that. So now we got rid of grocery tax. But it's time to do an income tax cut for the lowest Oklahomans. We've been talking about it in 21, and I think both chambers have talked about it. We've been studying it. I've called 3 special sessions. We talked about it this year, and we keep just spinning people in a circle because when we go on the doorstep, when we're on the doorstep, I would challenge everybody here, all the Republicans in this room, your flyers are all telling people that you're for tax cuts, you're for limited government, you're for smaller government. And so let's put a vote up. Let's be honest with Oklahomans where we stand on this issue.
2 years ago,
just going
Governor, 2 years ago, we put up a tax cut for a quarter point. We put a reduction in the corporate income tax by 2%. We reduced the in lieu of a tax for banks at 2%. We've eliminated the franchise tax. We've eliminated the marriage penalty tax. We've given parental choice and gave a huge tax break there. We have given the largest tax cut about 75 days ago. You signed into law. It will go effective at the end of August. Our record in the Senate is clear. So if my members go to the door and say they're for less taxes, they have a record to prove it.
And you're making my point for me. Every time we've done it, our revenue keeps going up because we're the most business-friendly state. And we've got to keep this momentum,
Yeah, but
Tim,
the
instead of
revenue-
just spending.
The
That's the
revenue
point.
though, and the point that I was trying to make, you may have seen the article in the Tulsa World by Randy Crable. He attributed to the Senate Fiscal saying that the $809 million, the cost of the tax cut that you and the speaker are advocating for, that's actually your Oklahoma Tax Commission gave that number. They scored it at 809.9. And if you look at the Board of Equalization last year with the LCF, when we put money into the LCF, the Board of Equalization, which you have the control of, or at least partial control of, certified that revenue. So if we go to the position that you and the House have advocated of putting another 350 on top of that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to cut the taxes, not, as you say, for the poorest Oklahomans, but for the quarter point as well. So it's 321. I don't understand how you can look at me in the face and book $70 million for that tax cut when we know long-term it's going to cost 809.9. I also find it interesting.
809 million for
I
what?
also find it interesting, Governor, that forever we've seen your hand motions.
Yeah.
Recurring expenditures cannot exceed recurring revenue. The budget that you and the House are supporting does just that. The documents that the House handed us showed us $120 million upside down. All of a sudden, when you heard that last week, you said, yeah, but growth revenue will cover that. That's a complete shift from the fiscal prudence that you've had since you came in. I've always applauded you wanting to do that, to make sure that revenue does not get exceeded by expenditures. Now you're taking a position that is exactly the opposite. But if we want to have a back and forth on this, we've had this for 3 years now, we can do that, but it's not going to get us out of here with a budget agreed to. Obviously, I don't think we're gonna get there today, but I think we should go through these budget. If you all want to find cuts, came out to $809.9 million, or 321 in year one.
I'm not sure where the 800 billion is coming from, but
the
just for
Oklahoma
Oklahomans
tax,
here,
it's-
11.267 billion.
It's the Oklahoma Tax Commission.
They didn't score that correctly.
Yeah.
Well,
11.62 billion is
In
our,
in our assessment, that 800 million assumes a quarter cut initially. That's not what's in the bill.
correct, but if the Board of Equalization, I agree with you 100%, Charles, or Mr. Speaker, I apologize.
No problem, Greg.
Thank you. We normally call each other that behind closed doors, so but it assumes the Board of Equalization, you all have advocated for another 350 million on top of what is required on LCF. In order to effectuate the quarter point tax cut, you have to have just 400 million in growth. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's a complete red herring to say this is not a quarter point. It is a quarter point and a flattening of the rate, which is the 809.9. We have historically always gone to the tax commission numbers. Obviously, sometimes we disagree, but we get another analysis from the tax commission.
But I think the analysis does not take into effect that the quarter cut comes in the future only if revenues increase. Their scoring model assumes that the quarter cut happens to the top rate initially. It does not.
No, it assumes that in fiscal year 26 is what it assumes, because the first year it shows 321 million just based on the amount that you have in the first, the flattening right here, 320. I'm sorry, I was flipping to the $321.8 million is what it assumes in FY25.
that's correct, 325 million. So back to my point, if we have 11.26 million in income, 11.26 billion in income, that doesn't include the 100 million worth of sweep. As long as we keep our expenses at about 11 billion, one time, just ongoing expenses, we can afford that. That's all I'm talking about. The 800 million, I don't know, that's like a blue herring. We're only talking about flattening the
What's a
rate.
blue herring? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, well, sorry, red herring, red herring.
I like the blue herring better. Blue tick hound, whatever it is.
But the flattening of the rate is only 300 million. We can absolutely afford to do that. You say you want to talk about revenue. Let's talk about the revenue. If that's all I'm saying is we are going down a path here, and it feels like everybody's stalling on tax cuts. Everybody's stalling because we're just growing government.
We did it immediately after your Board of
part
Equalization.
of just growing the government without talking about
Governor,
the revenue side.
Your Board of Equalization met on February 15th.
Hold on.
We passed the
On that
grocery.
point,
Hold on one second. We
I know.
passed the grocery tax immediately thereafter.
And that is
So
awesome. I'm so
delay
pumped.
is
Oklahomans
an
are excited.
inaccurate statement. We delivered as soon as it was fiscally prudent to do so. I adamantly disagree with your
But Mr. Pro Tem, you know that we've been talking since 21. You've said you're studying income tax. I've called 3 special sessions, 1 income tax.
And we've cut income tax 2 years ago. Yes, sir.
No,
Yeah.
I think we cut it back in like 2020.
No,
We cut a quarter of a point in 2020. When did we cut it?
22.
No,
Trying to think what the
no, it
year
wasn't
was.
26.
It was the same year we did corporate.
When was it, Jeff?
It was 22.
21.
21.
For FY 22, yes, sir.
Okay, well, in the
Yeah.
21 session?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're talking about.
Mr. Pro Tem, though, to your point, the LCF, and this come up on Thursday, it is not a certified fund. It should not be on the BOE.
It's just on them, it's,
But it is.
no board action.
What was that, Brandy?
Correct, but
So it's not going to be self-fulfilling and triggering growth of 350.
it's included in the number.
It should be going.
I agree with you, it shouldn't, but you and I, Mr. Chairman, have no control of it. We don't have a seat on the Board of Equalization. And if we have a governor who's hell-bent on cutting those taxes, don't you think that he would want to use this to effectuate that tax cut?
I'll just tell you that since Thursday, I have looked, and that is not a certified fund.
Yeah, it's neither certified nor authorized, it's just on a.
But it's on an exhibit, but it's included in this justification. You all last
On
week,
our exhibit, because BOE did include it, we had it listed as income, and we also backed out the expenses on the sheet. I have a different sheet, but when you look at the 100% number versus the 95% that we're authorized, we're talking in circles about what the true recurring revenue is and whether or not LCF should be on the BOE, and it should not, in my opinion. I think you and I are agreeing on that as well, and it will not be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And if that's one of the concerns with LCF, because that is cash, it's not revenue.
Right.
Board of Equalization should have never included it as a fund. I mean, if that's one of the concerns with LCF, we can explicitly prohibit that action in statute if we want to trust.
just like the $1 billion that we're trying to save Oklahomans the cash for a downturn should not be included as an expenditure on the spreadsheet.
I agree with that, Pro Tem. I agree with that. And the billion, we have that. So the big picture here, the last thing I forgot to add. So 11.2 billion is our income this year. 11.2 billion. That doesn't include the sweep money that comes in, but also over the last couple of years in 22, above BOE numbers, we collected 1.8 billion. Last year, we collected 1.5 billion. This year, we're collecting another 500 million. We're on track over these BOE numbers. I'm not, and I appreciate your point, Pro Tem. We're not advocating to spend and put Oklahomans in a bad situation over reoccurring income. But it is time that we talk about helping the poorest Oklahomans in an income tax reduction and flattening those rates out, because it does a couple things. Not only it helps Oklahomans, and we've seen income go up every year, it's not our money, but also it slows the growth of government. If we sit in here and we go line by line, we're going to keep growing government. And we can spend however we want, but last year we spent $12.9 billion, okay? That's still over reoccurring income. Luckily, we've had these excess surpluses, but this is unsustainable long-term. Let's keep up with Arkansas and Texas and Iowa and Nebraska, and all these states are continuing to cut. And you made my point. We've done some things over the last 5 years, and revenue keeps going up because our economy's booming. So let's not just keep spending Oklahomans' hard-earned money. Let's give them a tax break.
So Governor, I was setting I think at some point we can help the poorest Oklahomans by talking about the Health and Human Services budget that we were on next. But the other thing, I was at a conference 2 years ago, Senate presidents from around the country. And we always have to give a fiscal update, like how's your state doing? What's your rainy day status? All of that. And I will tell you, I went into that meeting extremely cocky about what we have done in this building to save the record savings we have had. And they went around the room, and I went right after the Senate president from, I believe, California or New York, one of the two. And I was ready to boast about our fiscal prudence, about how awesome we have done in managing the people's money. And I think we do deserve credit for that. But as we were going around the table and it got to California and New Jersey, they both said, we have record savings because of our management. It dampened my spirits a little bit because we have had so many federal dollars flow through our economy that we don't know what our true base level of revenue is. I don't think you, nor I, nor the speaker, or anyone in this room knows what our true base of revenue is because of the funny money the federal government has put through our economy. Now, some of that funny money has gone to very valid programs. I applaud Chairman Hall and Chairman Hilbert, Chairman Wallace, Chairman Thompson for the way they ran the ARPA committee and using those federal dollars. We have so much money flowing through our economy right now. I don't think we can honestly say we know what the base revenue is. We will talk each other in circles. I agree with you. I think a good way to get through this process to see where your cuts are in health and human services to be able to afford the $809 million long-term. Because you've always told me.
I'll answer it.
But me and the speaker, when we've said in these meetings, you have always said, guys, we shouldn't just think about the next fiscal year. We should be thinking about how much does this impact the budget 2 or 3 years down the road. I think that's wise. So when we look at $70 million booked on that tax cut that you're now advocating for, why not look at the 809.9 and tell me where in the health and human services budget you want to cut?
Okay. Again, you're making my point for me. If we don't know what the future holds, then we've got to go to a flat budget.
Well, but that's
we increased $1 billion last year, not including ARPA and not including one-time items, just raise base level expenses. I think it was around 1.1 billion. Why can't you go back to those numbers? Why do we every year come in here and think we're going to increase another $1 billion, Pro Tem, Speaker? I mean, we have to think about these. If you really think that we're in a revenue problem next year, then why are we growing government at all? Why don't we go back to last year's appropriations? Why don't we have flat budgets? That's what I propose in my State of the State.
Governor, we did grow expenditures last year because we made a record investment in public education and in private school choice. And so I think we all stood at a press conference cheering that on. You weren't saying, dadgummit, Greg, why did you grow government by $800 million to invest in education? You weren't saying that. In fact, you were at the press conference with me in your blue room suggesting it was one of the greatest things that's ever happened. I still think it was one of the greatest things that's ever happened. If you want to go flat, we can talk that. The House position, I don't know where, are y'all at your 416 number today or your 510 number?
There's a variation of both, but based on negotiations from last week, the things we have agreement on would be from that 510.
Okay.
The movement from the Senate pulling back to the agreed to positions before on those items, we're going to be back at the original numbers as well.
I think it'd be very helpful for us to go through HHS.
I would say, though, the original House budget was basically 2% less than last year's appropriation.
I know,
They
but
have a tax cut in it as well.
but
But the semantics is in the details and the line items, no doubt. That's what we're here arguing about.
yeah, the speaker, I think, and you can admit that a lot of that 416 budget wasn't realistic because you didn't account for the 600 million at healthcare authority. You didn't account for flex benefit allowance, things that are in the law that we have to fund unless we change the law. You did not account for. So I think
We do have the 16.1 for flex benefits. The
You do
600
now,
million,
yes.
the 600 million in the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, you guys booked it different than we did. And still today, just a couple of weeks ago, I checked, and it's because we've over appropriated the healthcare authority. They're sitting on 1.5 billion cash right now. Their entire budget is at 1.5 billion per year. So I mean, if you want to talk about cutting,
yeah.
if you want to talk about cutting something,
That number's different today.
yeah, it's probably higher.
Well, let's go through it. I mean, healthcare authority is the first on the list of where we dropped off last week. I think it'd be a very helpful conversation to have to inform our conversation on every other thing. And I'll turn it over to Chairman Hall to go through that, or what? 468 was that now?
And last thing, I think I've been really, really clear about continuing to go line by line. But I'm asking both chambers to vote on a flattening the tax cut to lower the income for the poorest Oklahomans. That's $300 million approximately, Pro Tem and Speaker. I think we should do that. I think we should have a lowering of all the lower brackets. It's $300 million. We can absolutely afford it. I've already showed you the numbers, and we keep our expenses around $11 billion.
Explain to me that bill.
Perfect. So the bill takes all of the lower brackets.
Which
So
are what?
4.75 right now is the highest income bracket. So if you make over 27,100, you start paying 4.75 if you're filing jointly. Underneath that, there's some brackets. So other states have a flat tax. Basically, they get rid of all those lower brackets. So anybody that files jointly that makes under $27,100 would pay no taxes. That's about so every Oklahoman also pays those brackets so they hit the 4.75. We're not going to touch the top bracket, but we're going to help the poorest Oklahomans. It's a $300 million impact. We're talking about spending $1.5 billion in savings. We can absolutely afford to do that. We vote on that. We get that across the finish line. It doesn't touch the top bracket until future years. And the only time it would affect the future years is when you have excess revenue, okay? And so that basically puts a governor on spending. That's good for Oklahomans, putting a governor on spending. So when you have excess revenue in the future, it would automatically trigger a 1/4 point tax cut. But you have to have revenue income. You'd have to have income revenue to do that. Okay. So that's all I'm asking for both chambers to vote on. Put it across the finish line. We can afford it. And then we can modestly keep growing some programs. But if you were really concerned about the future and you think we're running into a fiscal cliff, then why are we growing anything this year? Why don't we go back to you just said it, we spent $700 million in education last year. Let's keep those guys flat. And let's keep all the agencies flat because everybody got a huge pay increase last year. Everybody's getting pay increases except hardworking Oklahomans.
Thank you for saying the 321 million because the numbers that you and the House have advanced actually have deducted 74 million from that. So it's really, you're only booking 75 million and you're already showing $120 million upside down. So you're at $190 million upside down without any contemplation of the parental choice tax credit going up next year, without any contemplation of the grocery tax being fully realized, without any of those considerations that add up to an additional $225 million. And so your proposal requires us to exceed revenue with expenditures if you're in full alignment with the House.
I need to go back and look. I don't believe that, Speaker, or Pro Tem. We also, at 11,267, we can run the numbers with all the sweeping. We've also showed we're tracking 500 million more. We collected $1.5 billion more the year before.
Correct.
So,
I think that's an important point to note. We've been 1.8 above, 1.5 ahead. Our projections are going to be 500. So that's a drastic drop off of what we've been experiencing. So we're not going to see the same cash reserves. The Board of Equalization, which you have the most control over, changed the methodology for this February certification that we're used to. We're used to taking the more conservative estimate and running with that. This year, you all took an average of the high and the low, which probably is good practice. I applaud for you updating it. But we're not going to see the cash reserves that we've had based on the change that you've made at Board of Equalization next year.
So are you telling me you're willing to take a tax cut and vote as long as the revenue and expenses?
Governor, I'm telling you, it's like I've told you since day one. You don't run the Senate chamber. I decide what goes up for a vote on the Senate floor in consultation with my caucus. I'm not going to sit here and give control of the Senate to the governor of the state of Oklahoma.
Nope. I'm just wanting to be clear. Are we talking, will you do any kind of tax cut this year?
Yeah, grocery tax, $408 million.
But not an income tax.
Governor, we looked at the numbers that you gave us on February 15th. We made the most prudent decision given those, and we looked at the one that would impact the most Oklahomans the most immediately.
So the answer is no, you're not going to look at an income tax.
Governor, we have looked at an income tax. We decided to go with the grocery tax. Okay. Are you going to sign a budget that we passed to you?
I haven't seen the budget. I haven't seen the budget yet, but I will tell you this. That's why
you haven't seen the budget yet. It's been in front of us the last.
Yeah, and we're at 416, and you went back to your numbers, and that's why we're here talking.
So thank you.
So I'm very excited to look at these numbers, but I just want to be very, very clear. Going line by line and increasing everybody's and playing Santa Claus is not something that I signed up for. I represent 4 million Oklahomans that are hurting with inflation, not bigger government, Pro Tem.
So you did not sign up for the legislature. The legislature is in control of Article
That's
5,
exactly
Section
right.
55. So if you don't want to be a part of going through line by line, I understand that. If you want to remove yourself from this
Yeah.
discussion.
Next time, I mean, I'll sit in and watch this, watch you go line by line if that's what you guys want to do. But yeah, next time you guys can meet on the budget, but I just want to be very clear. I think we should vote on a tax cut for Oklahomans that are hurting the most, under $27,100.
In February, we did.
Pro
We
Tem,
absolutely did.
you did not do an income tax cut. They're still
No,
paying income
we
tax.
did
I'm
two
trying
years
to
ago.
eliminate the income tax for people making under $27,100. Trying to eliminate it. Mississippi has eliminated under $33,000. Arkansas is lowering their income tax. We already should have done the grocery tax because we were only 12 states that did it. That's a very regressive tax. But the income tax for the poorest Oklahomans is something we should consider. And I applaud, I'm glad you got, Mr. Speaker, are doing that. I would just encourage the Senate to do that. And then I'll turn it over to the appropriations chairs or whatever you guys.
Governor, in terms of the tax cut that you're looking for, we've talked about House Bill 2950, which is the House side. On the House side, there was a Senate measure introduced similar. Are you targeting the quarter cut off growth revenue in the future off the 400 million in the House version or the 500 million in the Senate version?
I'm fine with either one of those. If it's 500 million that it triggers a quarter of a point tax cut, that would be amazing, because that at least puts us on a path, and we know as our economy's booming, we're automatically triggering these quarter of a points. I think that's amazing. I love the Senate version.
You're agnostic on that.
I just think it signals to the business community that Oklahoma is not going to just keep spending money every year. We're going to automatically trigger, if our economy's booming, we're going to continue to trigger these tax cuts. You can look at Florida and New York. These states in Pro Tem, I don't know exactly when your meeting was, but it's my understanding California has a budget deficit now. I don't think California has a surplus.
They do, because they spent and they cut taxes. They did all the things we're talking about because they were so cocky that they had a revenue.
So California cut taxes?
Yeah, in certain areas, not the income tax you're talking about, not the grocery tax. They already did not tax groceries, but they gave special handouts. And they spent themselves into oblivion. I agree with you. We've got to stay under revenue.
Yeah,
but no, they're experiencing shortfalls. New York's experiencing shortfalls. Many states are. We are always counter-cyclical in Oklahoma based on our oil and gas revenue and how it drives our economy. We must be very judicious in how we approach this, because I was in this room, the speaker was in this room when we were talking about having to cut $1.3 billion. We were in this room when we had to decide how to cut $800 million. We were in this room when we had to cut $600 million. It was all well-intentioned trigger bills that put us on that path, all extremely well-intentioned. We had MCF of natural gas was through the roof at the time. We were leading the nation in producing natural gas. Our companies were driving our economy. They're driving our economy now, but we cannot be cocky in that when wars happen in Ukraine or violence happens and war happens in Israel, it perverts the markets. And so we are riding pretty well right now on oil and gas revenue, but that is not going to last ad infinitum. We've got to make sure that whatever we do can sustain Oklahoma's economy, Oklahoma's unique economy. And so I say it with all due respect. I just disagree. The Senate has taken a position. I think that we could have a very helpful conversation if you not only hold it flat, but you tell us where the cuts come from within your agencies, because we didn't see agencies coming to us saying, even the ones you directly control, saying, hey, we want to cut. They came to us with expenditures they wanted us to consider. Some of them pulled back when you gave the mandate that they had to go flat. We've looked at those very thoroughly, but we have not seen from you or your agencies cuts that tantamount to being able to afford an $809.9 million drop in revenue by FY26.
Okay. So let me, for point of clarification, is it the trigger in the tax cut bill that's problematic for the Senate? I mean, is that, if that comes out?
It's the fact that you have not respected the fact that we said we were going to look at all tax policy and decide the best one we could afford. We made that decision back in February or March. You want us to respect you and your process, we do. I want you to respect us and our process. The process we went through involved all senators, and we made a decision to deliver on the largest tax cut in state history through the grocery tax by partnering with you all. We do amazing things when we actually work together. But when you try to pit us, the 2 against 1 scenario, we walk in here, we already know that you all have met on numbers. We already know that y'all have conspired, not in some nefarious way, but you work together on all these things. You're in lockstep with the governor. I just will not turn my chamber over to the governor of the state of Oklahoma. We have to go through these numbers and really decide. Now, I respect you, Governor. I actually personally like you, despite some of the coverage to the contrary. I find you to be, besides we're in budget negotiations, a very likable person. I respect you. I respect you being a family man. I respect you inviting me and Marissa to your daughter's wedding. You and Sarah have been nothing but awesome to me and Marissa. And I want to make sure that people know that it's not some personal hatred. It's a difference between what you think is sustainable and I think is unsustainable. It comes down to that. I have lived through the dark days of Oklahoma. I've lived through some of the darkest days in Oklahoma budget-wise. These days are fun. It doesn't look like it right now. But when we're talking about this type of revenue, when we're talking about excess, and yes, we played a part in it, but Oklahoma businesses, Oklahoma families, Oklahoma people who go to work day in and day out are the ones that are driving this surplus. And I know that you're saying deliver it to the poorest among us. We have. We delivered it in the form of the parental choice tax credit, pushing it down to the poorest families, Senate perspective, and we chose to deliver on the $408 million when fully realized grocery sales tax elimination, the state portion. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. And I would love to get into what actually impacts the budget. Our constitutional duty that we have to be done with by May 31st is going through here and deciding how much we're going to appropriate to each one of these entities. I am completely fine and understanding that if you deduct $321.8 million from your expenditure side and argue that you can cut and afford a tax cut, but I have yet to see cuts that actually put us revenue positive from your side. Now, I do know the 416 numbers are drastically lower than the 510 numbers. But I would love to go line by line and hear where you think Oklahomans, can we cut provider rates? Can we cut indigent care? Can we pull back on DD waivers? I mean, let's go through each one of these. And if you advocate for a cut, we'll listen to you. We've not heard that thus far.
On the tax cut issue, I appreciate the grocery tax, the action on that. I think we've always assumed that that we've always wanted both. And that's why we continue to talk about it. I think, and these meetings are for those discussions. I think it's a mischaracterization to say the governor and the House are in lockstep on things. We communicate with everybody.
Where are you in disagreement on this budget with him?
Pardon?
Where are you in disagreement on this budget with him?
I don't even know where we're in agreement on this budget with the governor, quite honestly.
Well, then let's go through line by line and figure that out.
I do believe we've got to decide if the tax cut is going to be something considered personal income tax or a variation of it is going to be considered in the Senate.
It takes you passing it. It takes us passing it. I'm telling you that your bill did not advance. House Bill 2950 did not advance. We are operating under the assumption we're not passing any more tax cuts this year. We are operating under an assumption that we have a constitutional duty to get done by May 31st. We are working in good faith. That your bill did not advance, and you know how the process works.
I do. And every year in JCAB, things that get agreed to in the budget negotiations get run out of JCAB.
And that's the reason we changed our process on the Senate side this year.
I want to move from assumptions to finality. And I just need to know, is the Senate going to support some version of a personal income tax this session that would be part of this budget?
No.
Okay.
We will move on down the road and look at it. Now, I know full well that the governor may veto the budget. Let me ask you, will you override a veto if we agree to you on numbers? If the governor does not get the tax cut he's demanding, and we agree to numbers on a budget, will you agree with me today to put up an override vote on this budget?
I'll have to see what the governor does with the budget before our chamber will make up its mind on an override. I would hope we wouldn't need to contemplate an override.
We've had to do that a lot.
I understand, but here we are in the first ever open budget negotiations. This is the opportunity for us to put together a budget that everybody will support and take the veto override question off the table.
Will you put up any overrides?
Mr. Pro Tem, in that same statement, if you
I'm
will
not
come to the
opposed to
table and
putting
agree with
up
us
an
to our
override
budget,
if
it
necessary.
has a tax cut in it.
I'm sorry.
In that same statement that you just made, if the Senate will line up, come to an agreement to the House budget, which has a tax cut in it, come to the agreement for the tax cut.
Well, if you come to our agreement, it's all done too. I appreciate that.
That's
I
why we're
appreciate
in the middle.
That's the way it works.
But you keep saying, come to your side, come to your side, come to your side. There is two chambers.
There are, and we've come to your side in plenty of areas. Some of
So is
those,
the House.
some of those areas, Mr. Chairman, you were upset at the process that we took to get there, but we arrived there nonetheless. I mean, some of the things that you talk about agreements behind closed doors that I said were unacceptable. After we've had an open, transparent process, we've come to your number. We actually have a lot more agreement than we do disagreement. I respect you. I respect your subcommittee chairs. I respect your vice chair. I respect your speaker. I respect your speaker pro tem, everyone involved. I'm just asking you to respect our process. All we did was have to take it back to the subcommittee to get input from the full Senate. We got input, and in many areas, not all areas, but many areas, we lined up with what your position was. And so we fully know that Article 5, Section 55 doesn't just apply to the Senate, it applies to the legislature as a whole, and we respect your part of the process.
So just to be clear, the numbers that you're saying that you come to were both concessions and agreements between the House and Senate.
Correct. Just like
And we were
everybody.
much further along than we were whenever you pulled everything back, then did come to some of the positions that both the House and Senate had already agreed on, but then you called them just House positions. That's a little misleading.
Okay, joint positions of the legislature. I'm sorry,
You
semantics are
agree to
important. I know.
confirm your agreements. I got you.
Well, let me throw out, you guys are saying if we can get revenue neutral with the tax cut, and it's not a cut if you go back to last year's appropriation. If we can show both chambers last year's appropriation with this $300 million flattening of the brackets, why not pass that budget? Well, why are we sitting here trying to continue to grow government? Why can't we go back to the largest budget ever issued in the state of Oklahoma, which was the fiscal year 24, which was last year's budget, and make that flat?
I'm pretty satisfied with the budget we entered last year. Did you sign that one, or I can't remember?
I think I'll let that go into law.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I totally understand the process, and I've vetoed to several budgets. You guys have overrode the budgets. And if I'm standing on the side of 4 million Oklahomans for lower taxes, spell my name correctly. That doesn't bother me. And you know that, Pro Tem, because I'm not here just to grow government. And I don't know why we're advocating, because these are all great programs. We had the largest budget ever last year. Why can't we go back to a flat budget? And then give Oklahomans a tax cut?
Well, let's go through it. You show us where the cuts are, let's go.
It's not cuts to go back to the last year's budget, right?
Some of them are. In order to get to a sustainable, to afford the entirety of the tax cuts we know, plus the tax cuts we know are going to go into effect next year, or the reduce in revenue.
Perfect.
Some of those are.
We can have secretary laws.
No, I
Draw
want
that for
to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
give me concrete examples where you've gone to your cabinet secretaries or your agency heads and said, I want these programs cut, not just hold flat, but cut. You say there's waste in government. I agree, but you have a better perch to look at where that waste is than I do. Give me concrete examples where you think we're wasting money.
Perfect. If you go back and we'll pull back out my state of the state budget.
But your budget
And
was
those were-
based on numbers that are no longer accurate, because no fault of your own, just the way the process works, because the budget actually went up. So I would like you to look
We
at it.
can certainly bring that up and share that with you. I can't do it within the next 5 minutes, but we can certainly do that.
All right, Health and Human Services, Chairman Hall, I'd like to start going through that.
Great, we're ready. Are we gonna put our sheet up on the?
If y'all allow it,
I
yeah.
think
Do you have the sheet?
We did email it over. Do you have it down there?
Blake, can you put the Senate's budget up?
Thank you.
Great, we'll look at Health and Human Services, the blue. Great, we'll start with the Healthcare Authority, Mr. Chairman. Does that work with you?
It's from our negotiated position. Just so you're aware.
Mr. Chairman, are you all right with starting with the Healthcare Authority?
I think we can probably, is there a way to zoom in on that document at all? Thank you.
I would like to pull up the House portal to review the House numbers.
So the 510 position is the current portal for the House, is that correct? Yeah, so. Right, those are all the current numbers off the current portal.
Yeah, we went on the website.
Could I ask while you have, I know everybody's doing stuff, send stuff, can you guys email
We
didn't
went
get
to
it- we
your,
didn't get a
this
copy.
document so I can follow
We
it?
got a link to your
Is that a
website.
problem?
We sent you a copy of our sheet.
Did you say you sent a copy of this?
yeah, so Mr. Chairman, on Friday, we sent you a copy of our most recent sheet. And then in good faith, we were hoping to receive the House's position. What we received was a web address reference to your portal.
That would be.
And so we
the,
went, we pulled those off
transparent way
that
for you to see the
web
House
page.
position. I've been told that your number to not reflect the portal numbers on the House position.
That the House position of 510 are not what are currently on the portal?
Well, depending on what time on 510 you might look at that. What time did you look at it? Are you saying
I believe-
Friday? I said
After we,
Friday. like Saturday.
you all sent, right, when we sent you our sheet, you all sent us a web address. And we went to that and
So
included those.
Healthcare Authority is the first thing you have up.
Correct.
Right. If there's something inaccurate there, you can point it out to us. We'll operate
Yeah.
off whatever number you want to operate off.
Absolutely.
One is, and I mentioned this earlier in the same conversation, that 600 million, we didn't book it the same way you did last year. There's no reason to replace the appropriation that we did give them. We appropriated them from their fund, the 600 million. So on my sheet, it looks like
Well, the 600 million for the
top subcommittee.
the 600 million even dates back to your 416 original.
Well, yeah, as we go through, if there's something that's not consistent with our position, we can point that out as we go.
That'd be great.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Just point it out, and we can talk about it. I mean, the first one that I have on our sheet that doesn't exactly line up is the long-term care rate increase for FY '24. One of us could, I mean, it appears to me that maybe there might be some sort of typo. We're off $200,000 almost exactly. Just curious if maybe you might have meant to be at 47.7 instead of 47.5. The agency request was at 47.7.
So the
I showed
600
that
really
we're
wasn't,
47.5.
600 wasn't new money last year, it was existing money they had in the fund. That was
Well,
We're talking about the long-term.
we're on the long-term care rate increase
Okay.
piece is where we're at right now. We're just trying to reconcile that $200,000 difference.
We're 200,000 higher on that.
I'll come to your position, but that does bring up a point of discussion about JCAP, because the other thing on provider rates, for long care, given the rate of $44 per day. In the last communications we had with Healthcare Authority, they said they could absorb that within their budget.
So, Mr. Chairman, I am very fortunate, very lucky to have a vice chair who serves as the subcommittee chair for HHS, Senator Racino. Senator Racino, you want to talk about the?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're right. So the Healthcare Authority did say they can use remaining FMAP money to get that, to add that 25 million in to get it up. but we know that after that, it will be in the base. That
Not
is
for
what the
FY
healthcare covers.
25, you're talking about for 26.
Yes.
That's not in this budget.
That's part of the growth that I keep talking about, the amounts to the 225. We know, I think that's baked into that number, is it not?
It is.
Okay. So we're fine using the one-time cash, but we just need to make sure that you all know that our position is that we want to fund that on a recurring basis. So I know, Representative Hilbert, you and I have gone back and forth a little bit about, is it recurring or is it one-time based on this deal? We'd be using one-time cash to pay a recurring expense in this instance.
And my understanding, talking to our Chairman Racino, is we need a minimum of 30, not 25 for this program. But I would agree it would be coming out of the 1.5 billion in cash that OHCA has over there.
The 30 million wasn't directly talked to me about that, but they may have changed.
Okay.
Because we initially had 25 million, and I think that got us up to 72 million, was
And I
initially
am
asked.
here in agreement for JCAB bill to give them $44 a day.
I'm not privy to that number, if that's what my chairman says.
Would you audible confirm that? Thank you.
And so are we suggesting then that you're suggesting that it takes 30?
Yeah, 30 instead of
as
25.
opposed- We'll come to that position.
We'll come to the House position. Chairman
Well,
Wallace.
keeping in mind, they're going to absorb that within their budget. We're not adding additional funds.
Yeah,
Right.
I just wanted you to note, came to House position.
And I believe,
We came here.
We're not keeping score today.
We reconciled with the 200,000.
No,
Thank you very
I'm
much.
just playing with it. We're good. We're completely agreeable on that.
Two perspectives of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Senator Racino, we're on the reappropriated $9 million for HIE.
yeah, so that was, we had put in 30 million last year for the HIE grants. And I think this was actually, the House position also to reappropriate 9 million back, because we didn't think that we were going to spend the whole 30 million. That would still leave some money in there should providers decide that they want to get on the HIE.
And what line item is that? Can you blow
Yeah,
this
it's
a little bit bigger?
Mr. Chairman, it's the second from the bottom on the Healthcare Authority.
So is this where we're pulling back the Shine grant? Weren't we going to use the Shine grants to fund this?
Yeah, so that's what it is. The
Okay.
HIE is that, and we reappropriated 9 million. That was actually the House position.
Unused portion.
So
Okay.
you're restating the agreements that we had.
After we've got input from
We
the
got
Senate.
here, so now you're restating them up here.
But Mr. Chairman, the only point that we're trying
It's
to
just not
make
in
is
the portal,
it
so-
wasn't in your portal position. We just wanted to clarify it.
Yeah, I don't have it on my sheet.
So are you
So you-
agreeable to that or not?
Yeah, that's what we'd agreed to
Okay.
prior to last week's beginning of the budget summit where you pulled back. Isn't that correct, Chairman Rosino?
Well, I would say when I was in that meeting, the agreement was between you and the former chair. I was just sitting there.
But we have reaffirmed that position.
Our commitment to the 9
Yes,
million.
yep, that was agreed to.
So we can expect to see that on the portal then too. We'll book it on ours.
So when you say booking it too, we're reusing that, so we're not pulling it out.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll just be an appropriation.
Be just-
to move off the form.
That's right.
It'll just be an appropriation to them from that.
Yes, and then I do not have our subcommittee chair, Lawson, or excuse me, McIntyre in the room. Those conversations have been had. Chairman Rosino in here.
And I will say this publicly, Representative McIntyre and Lawson have been very good to work with. So they've been straight, and we've been straight back and forth.
Mr. Chairman, it appears we're in agreement on the Healthcare Authority.
Okay.
My next line is the Department of Mental Health.
Mine's the health department, but I will go to mental health. Okay.
Department of Mental Health, it appears that the outstanding question remains the state question 781, increased savings. I believe is the House position, is my memory, and correct me, Senator Racino, to remain at the 24 level.
That's correct. And when we took it back to our subcommittee, the subcommittee asked that we put it back in because that was the loft request.
Currently, and I don't want to misquote, I'm gonna look at staff, but I believe that we have 12 million in the base. Is that the correct number?
12.5.
Yeah, I believe that's accurate.
12.5. So that is in the base already and reoccurring.
Yes.
We're not pulling any of that out. The House position was not to add to it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
our subcommittee thought it was important.
So, Mr. Chairman, all we're looking at is the loft report that indicated that the state question 780 increase in savings number was 5.3, and to honor the state question 781, that's where the Senate position came from.
I will state that we changed the statute to have law present that at one time. Owens was coming up with a statement based on what was given from EOC. There was definitely not agreement in this building with those numbers. Currently, the 12.5 is being utilized for facilities, tablets, for law enforcement to have to come in contact. What is the proposal for the additional funds, and why is that good for Oklahoma?
Well, I think we continue down to honor the desires of 781 to put the savings back in mental health. I mean, the mental health crisis in this state is huge and certainly needs to be addressed. Any additional funds can go to offset the expense associated with serving the mental health need in the state of Oklahoma.
We were very specific in what the 12.5 was to be utilized for in types of programs and structures. Tell me what an additional
Great.
5.34 will be used for.
I have no idea what they want to use that for, but that was the loft's request. And much of this is obviously being used for mental health services provided to that people who have some pretty addictive personalities.
So
But Mr.
it would
Chairman,
be this Senate's argument that definitely want to do what loft requests and their impacts indicate in this budget.
That is not the Senate's request. That is what our subcommittee says.
and so,
and-
Mr. Chairman, if it helps you for us to go back and work with the Department of Mental Health and get a line item approach to how these funds will be used, we'll certainly get that for you and bring it back at our next gathering.
The 780 and 781, one of the main concerns the House has always had about that is just sending money down as the savings without checks and balance or oversight and no programs is something the House cannot get behind.
I think we're comfortable with that. Why don't we just, we'll leave it set, go to the next agency.
While we're on mental health, though, we do need to talk about Griffin. Commissioner Friesen did come and talk to our joint subcommittee with Chairman Hayes and I, and our committee members on ARPA. She believes the ARPA funds will get her enough for the current fiscal year, but we all do need to be aware that next year we're going to have to provide additional funds if we're going to complete that project. We don't want it to be halfway completed.
Right, and we don't know what that number is going to be yet until we see what we're going to get from the sale of assets down in Norman.
In regards to
and
that-
and philanthropic.
Right.
In regards to the sale of assets, the state is going to step in because part of the gap that they have is based on an appraisal and now a prediction that the sale of the property will not reach the appraised estimate to begin with. I think we need JCAB that we're going to actually put in statute to sell those properties will go to general revenue.
Well, we can certainly talk about that. Don't disagree that I think there's an anticipated gap as a result of the sale of assets from what we originally thought. So I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, which is expected. The Tulsa Center for Behavioral Health had increased costs from inflation, and we never got an estimate until a couple weeks ago.
Hey, you presented me a rabbit trail. I want to go down real quick for 1 second.
Is it on the healthcare budget?
It is.
Okay, great.
And maybe I can just ask legal staff, but when I used to be the subcommittee chair over Health and Human Services, at that time, Commissioner White always told us if we sold that Norman facility, this is my best of my recollection, I don't want to put words in her mouth, that there was some kind of trust that was obligated that we put that money back into some kind of trust. That's the best of my recollection. I want to make sure before we agree to any JCAB, we're not violating any trust language that may or may not exist.
I would lean on legal staff as well, but I can tell you the current proposal that came about from last year was the sale of the property to put in the investment in Donahue for a tune of 50 mil between the sales of the
I
property.
recall that. I just want to make sure we're not running afoul of any legally binding trust. But I just want to put that out there for us to figure that out.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we'll go where you want, but my next line item is the Department of Health.
Okay.
I think we're in alignment except for there's a $35,000 approximately dollar difference from Senate Bill 1709 that the floor leader of the House authored. I just think there may be a typo of $35,000 difference, and that's if the bill is signed by the governor, that money would transfer from to the Department of Health to cover the Office of Client Advocacy moving.
Did you say 35,000?
Yeah, because I think we've got a book for $2,035,333, and you guys have $2,300,000. So if that makes sense. So 200 something thousand, sorry. I just think there's a typo, Mr. Chairman.
260,000 basically on his bill and your bill.
I think it's the same number. If you go down to DHS, it's the same number that we use on DHS.
Well, you guys are the authors. I mean, how much is?
I think from the negotiations we had a few weeks ago, I thought the House position, if the bill passed, then we'd do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the
There's a
number.
difference in the number, Mr. Chairman, that's
That
all.
we're about 35,000 off on.
So you're gonna pick that back up, Bill?
Is that 265?
You're gonna pick that back up whenever, the other agencies will put the money or pull the program from, correct?
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, do you have your health and, your DHS sheet, Department of Human Services sheet? If you look, you'll see the numbers match on that one, removing. So we just have to fix it on health, that's all.
Going from one agency to the other.
Right.
Program.
Yes.
Just, you have one number consistent, but then when you go up to the health department, it's just a change.
So you reflect the 2035 coming from human services.
35,333.
But when we bump it up in the Department of Health, that number is different on your portal. So can we stay consistent there?
Yes.
Okay. Great. All right, Mr. Chairman, it appears to me that we're now in agreement with the Department of Health.
So it is actually $2,085,333, is that right?
$2,035,000.
35.
$333.
Okay, come to your number, Mr. President.
Thank you. Noted.
But we're not keeping score.
My next line item is for UHAT, University Hospital Authority.
Yeah, so the difference for us is the psychiatric residency program expansion, House Bill 34. We had 3,470,000. The House went to 2 million. Our subcommittee went back to 3,470,000. And that's both for UHAT and for OSU. And that is for it gives 5 slots to each university for psychiatric care.
Right, and then the negotiated agreements that day was put 2 million and you had, and then I assume as well. Is that correct? My memory serving.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, what we'd be doing then, in effect, is not fulfilling the full 5 slots that were requested, but filling something fewer slots. So something in the lines of nearly 3 slots on each side, as opposed if the Senate would come to the House number of 2 million.
I think 2 million will do 2.8 slots, where I think 5 million will do 5 slots each.
Right at 3 slots.
So since we're bouncing around between the 2 subcommittees, let's discuss those SUMO real quick before the House moves. The expansion project on SUMO for 30 mil, we had agreed to fund that through LCF. Is that going to be the current agreement today?
Where's the Suma? Oh, it's somewhere around
It looks like it.
Debt service of 1.5?
here. On where we at?
Yeah, the 1.5. So that's just LCF.
Okay. Yeah. So we've agreed to the 30 million. The question becomes whether or not we LCF or we do that with cash. And I think the last time we gathered here, we were, it's just a ongoing discussion, but the point is that we have agreed to fund the expansion. It's just a matter of whether we do it in cash or whether we do it with LCF.
So to be clear, either way, it is cash, we will have to fund LCF.
I don't disagree with you
There's
that,
cash there.
I don't disagree
There's
with
been
any
some
way.
statements that have been made that it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a buy now, pay later. Just for correction, the cash would have to be in LCF, state money, before you can move forward.
The good news is there's still cash available in LCF to be able to fund the lion's share of these programs that are being proposed. But I do want to sit down and discuss with the Senate, on the Senate side, whether we use cash, carryover cash, or we use the LCF that is currently in the LCF unfunded piece.
So then we don't have agreement on how we're going.
We don't have agreement on the financing of that, whether it's cash or LCF. We do have agreement to fund the program.
Okay. Well, until we can get agreement on that, because it is an aggregate budget that will impact the position of the House, where we're going to be on going from 2 to 2 or 3.4.
And those two are tied together how?
And an aggregate budget, I mean, we've had this discussion about going line item to line item. Is it a great idea? Sure. Do I support it? Sure. When we look at the overall position and getting agreement, and you're telling me that we don't have agreement on funding out of LCF, then it does have an impact.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I don't understand the correlation between the two, but, currently I think the Senate is prepared to take the psychiatric residency and come to your number at 2 million.
I'm glad, because this will be the second time the Senate's agreed to do that. Is that in both? UHAT and
Yep,
OSIM?
we'll do it on, yes, sir, we'll do it on both sides.
All right. And I'm still for LCF.
Well, and I'm still for having that discussion.
So while we're talking about UHAT, I do have a question. The Rogers State Building. How is that consistent with the mission of the OU Hospital to fund a building in Claremore through UHAT?
So we actually have it in Commerce. And so through the discussion today, we see that you are showing an LCF payment through University Hospital. We're actually booking the full value in Commerce.
So you're booking
And so
10?
we don't disagree that maybe Commerce is a better place for that.
Commerce already has 350,000 already going to RSU, so that avenue's already there for like television and some other stuff at RSU. So
Right.
That's why I think it was in Commerce.
We did it for RSU TV.
That's right.
2 years ago.
Yeah, this is the second year right now. So that next,
We'll agree to move to Commerce as well, but we want to structure 20-year debt service payback.
What's that?
We'll agree to move to Commerce as well, but we want to structure it out of LCF with 20-year payback on debt service.
Well, we continue to have those discussions, but the good news is that we've agreed to, we're agreeing to this new science building for RSU.
Just have to pay for it, yep.
That's agreement on OSIMA
No, that's not agreement on Asuma. You all are not currently booking the two projects at the University of Oklahoma for the wet lab and the engineering building at $80 million a piece. We're reflecting that as a one-time for them to construct those two projects.
We'll continue that discussion as well. That's funded, the House position would be out of LCF, but I think there's some other things we're going to have to discuss about LCF.
Mr. Chairman, is the House position to fund those wet lab and engineering building out of LCF?
I said we can continue those discussions. Those currently are not on our.
They're currently not on your sheet.
That's correct.
So you're at 0 on those.
So currently, the two OU projects, the House is at 0.
That's correct.
Okay. My next line item is Department of Veterans Affairs. Does that work for you, Mr. Chairman?
So you went to UHAT, not complete here, finished conversations, LCF, and then Veterans Affairs, okay?
Yeah, it appears, Mr. Chairman, that that the Senate is in agreement with the House proposed. on
You
your,
honor
on your
your
board.
agreements, I'll accept that, thank you.
We are in agreement.
And your position.
Wording.
We've already somewhat talked about the OSU Medical Authority. We're at the 2 million now for the psychiatric residency. Just a quick conversation. Anthony did some quick math and whispered in my ear. We're actually, so the slots at 2 million is, I think the chairman or the vice chairman was correct, that it's about 2.8 FTEs at that 2 million for another 80,000 or
So
so.
change it to 2,082,000.
Yes, sir. Would you be agreeable with that?
Yes, 2,082,000.
Let's go with that
For
then.
UHAT
And that
and
would be both for UHAT and University Medical. They'll get 3 FTEs. Great.
Good catch, Anthony.
Thank you for confirming.
I think he's surprised that I can actually hear him. Whispering in my ear. Oh, goodness. Okay, so with the exception of determining the OSU MC expansion of whether it's LCF or cash, I believe that we're in agreement with OSU Medical Authority.
Okay.
Where would you like to go next, Mr. Chairman? We have JD McCarty. Yeah, we're in agreement.
Top of my sheet, that's flat.
Yep.
Look on the medical marijuana, 40.
Yeah, it appears that the lab startup, you have we're showing it for 25, the 3.5, you all have it as supplemental.
That's correct.
Can you repeat that, Mr. Chairman? I didn't hear you.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
so what the argument, or what I'm pointing out the difference with OMMA, that we were reflecting the QA lab startup costs in 25, and the House is reflecting that as a 24 supplemental.
Mr. Chairman, I would add that Director Berry came into our subcommittee and said she did not need the money, that it's going slower than they thought, and they don't need it till July.
So July of
25.
So the question then would be, does she need 3.5 million July of 25 to start up, or does she need it in 12ths starting in July?
I think she'll need the 3.5, and then after that, it would be 12. But she said she does not need a supplemental in June if we're funding in July.
So the position would be, either way, it's a cash appropriation.
Right.
I mean, so the question is, do we get on the cash in June or July?
So the House will take the supplement off of 24, we'll come to your agreement and fund them out of general revenue.
Well, we'll come to an
I'm looking at
understanding that
Anthony, make sure that he's saying yes.
OMMA did not need it in 24 as supplemental, but it's needed more than likely in July or August 25. Good.
In agreement.
In agreement. I have Human Services next, Mr. Chairman. You know, good. Just checking in.
Children and Youth Services,
Is that where you want to go first?
that's what's up my sheet. I show that you're in agreement.
So I show we're in agreement on
We came to this position.
OCCY.
Next, we have, Office of Fiscal Concerns. We show the House can be in position in agreement.
We're in agreement, Mr. Chairman.
Human
Moving on.
Services.
No one's getting
Show
scored.
that we have a little bit of disagreement there.
In DHS?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, I would defer to my vice chair in a minute, but from what I can gather, I think there's some discussion related to how House Bill 1808, the child care subsidy, which was not heard in Senate committee, for $18 billion. I think that there, and I deferred to my vice chair, but I think that there was some discussion with the House subcommittee chair related to the possibility of being able to use that money and increase provider rates, which is why you saw us move from our 314 position of 15.5 million to 30 million, matching up with the matching up with the House's position, which is $15 million. And then an additional DD waiver funding of $3 million, which makes up the total amount of the 18. I defer to my subcommittee chair.
We agreed to that back between the two chairs.
But you are still booking the House Bill 1808 for the child care subsidy on your portal. Is that intentional or?
Lawson.
Yeah, and the number will be 30 mil for the provider rates.
Right.
And we'll utilize part of that funding as the 18 mil.
Yes.
Yes, and then 3 million of that should go to the wait list because we have new people coming on the wait list. That was, so of that 18, 15 would go into provider rate increase, 3 million would go to the wait list. But I think you guys have it on your portal. It's not on the wait list side. I think it's on childcare subsidy, I believe. Not,
We
I
will
just
have
think
those
it's-
discussions. I believe that you've also had a meeting this last week in regards to sequestering these funds for the DDS waiting list going forward.
sequestering these funds.
Make sure that for transparency's sake, we can see the funds that we're putting in the DDS waiting list and not commingling those to make sure that they're utilized to continue to work the program and the
Yes.
list down to zero.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have worked very hard together to take care of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And yes, that money should be spent on those people.
So we will need another JCAP bill to line this out, creating a separate fund. I was informed that you guys had conversations and were in agreement to do so as well.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
And Lawson's texting.
Okay, great. So, then the 18 for the House Bill 1808 then would come off.
Yeah, but we do, and this again, I know I'm kicking things to next session. We do need to continue to have conversations about childcare.
So I don't know if you know, Pro Tem Hilbert, but there has been some problems and I hope the House has been informed. But the agency has had some difficulty keeping track of what they've been spending on childcare in excess of some large amounts. So I've had several conversations with them and they are starting to roll back some of the things they've already been doing because they've overspent. And so one of the reasons that we're trying to watch childcare spending is to make sure that it's actually going for what it's necessary for. So we're already looking at the 5-star ratings and all kinds of other things because there's been some spending that people aren't aware of.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I'm just saying, we got to continue to talk about it. It's a real challenge. So.
I don't disagree. Mr. Chairman, I think we're in agreement as long as I'm clear that the additional DD funding for 3 million, which nets out to the 18 that we're talking about, works for the House.
Yes, but it's in the aggregate number. Is that not correct?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
It's not an additional on top of.
No. All right, we're in agreement on Department of Human Services. We have OJA and DRS remaining, and I show that we're in agreement on both. Mr. Vice Chair, do you agree with that?
Did you guys come to agreement on the supplemental for rehabilitative services?
So while the subcommittee, and Mr. Vice Chair, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but while the subcommittee, I believe, is in agreement with that supplemental, I think that there remains concern, as we're reflecting that as a one-time, if we don't keep that going, the penalties that would kick in as a result if we didn't keep that going on a recurring basis.
Yes, I believe that's true. If we don't, we're in agreement for that, but in 2 years, I believe in 2026, if we don't continue funding that, we will take penalties for not having MOE. So we just need to be aware of that.
We'll have to look at.
I understand, but I just want to make sure everybody does understand that.
So
Give me a list.
you did come to the supplemental.
We did come to the supplemental, yes.
The 3.1.
Yes. So that being the case, then the DRS is in balance.
Okay, OJA.
We're in balance.
resources.
Natural resources, sure. Where would you like to start, Mr. Chairman?
Department of Ag.
Okay.
The agriculture enhancement program, 250K. It's like you're back out of that agreement from a few weeks back.
In the ag enhancement and diversification, is that where you're at?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, all I can tell you is that we went through, took this back through the subcommittee. And this is what they came back on. Can you explain what what ag enhancement and diversification is?
It is a fund setup that is grants to help with ag programs as far as national, such as the Cattlemen's, got one coming this year, I'm trying to think of. Limousine show.
Do we have anything?
Communities can put in for the grants. Secretary of Ag come in to discuss this year that fund has been depleted. The fund has been created many years ago, but they're out of resources to give grants.
So these are to incentivize some of these, the Cattlemen's Congress, what?
It would be more for like a national limousine show that's gonna move their whole process to the city of Tulsa. It's to help kind of recruit them and bring those in as like a recurring event into the community every year. Similar to like we have the National Quarter Horse Show in Oklahoma City, something along the lines of the Cattlemen's Congress as well.
What, you said that there was, at some point, there was a baseline money for this, and what was that, and when was it put in?
Please hold.
But the only reason I asked the question is you said that the funds are depleted now, and I'm assuming that that there's an accounting of where those funds.
Are they depleted, or is it that there's this new opportunity with the limousine show? And that's,
Well, new opportunity, and then there's not funds available in the fund for the program.
Okay, so are we not enough funds for the program, or are we incentivizing a new program to come and stay?
Well, it's the communities apply for the grants.
Okay.
Get them.
How much?
What year was the last appropriation?
Well, so in 23, we put some in for Cattlemen's Congress, and then we removed that in 23, the 150,000.
Put it in at 21.
Removed it, put it in 21, removed it in 22. I mean, I don't mind, if we're talking specifically about wooing another, cattle show here. We have precedent for it with Cattlemen's Congress, Mr. Pro Tem. I mean,
Is this a Secretary Arthur request?
She's the one brought it up. We had the conversation. I believe that she requested a flat budget.
So she doesn't?
No, she approves of the funding. She says there's a need. That she did not, she requested a flat budget.
we have any idea of the economic impact for this show?
They all vary, but it is a huge economic impact on the state and the communities in which the events are held.
Let's talk through some of these other small line items and let me get some feedback from some members. And we will likely come to your number on that. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing something.
Okay. Looks like I'm showing that we're in agreement on multiple small increases there. First one I'm seeing that we're out of agreement on would be
Well, can we talk briefly about the,
bombing memorial, which we have as a supplement on the back page. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean, if you want to address the training materials for the bombing memorial, I'm pleased to do so. You all have it shown as a supplemental for 24.
You guys have it on miscellaneous, are you considering that supplemental if it's not down on supplemental line?
We're on the
Okay,
bottom.
the supplemental and miscellaneous, and then that is a request for 10 years, 1.5 annual.
Yep.
I think there was some conversations, members might have believed that that is just a one-time, but I'm fine with putting it under ag. But it will be a budget request and need next year going forward for the next 9 years after.
Yeah, well, we're both reflecting it as a one-time, you for a supplemental in 24 and our subcommittee as a one-time for 25.
We have it as a revolving fund, so those are not,
What's that?
we have it as a revolving fund.
Yeah, so were we doing both a supplemental and then it's in the base for FY 25?
What I want,
Sound right?
On your portal right now, you just have to revolve fund.
We have established a position, baseline with revolving funds, so they don't have like operational spots. Now, by having them revolve in miscellaneous, that does not imply supplemental or automatically imply one time. That's just, we don't have massive spikes or isolating from the space.
10 would cover the 10 year, just one time, 1 year. The 1 year, the 1.5 million.
So if we did a supplemental 1.5
Yeah.
and then 1.5 in the base, we're effectively giving them 3 million for this first year, and then they've got 1.5.
And then they get
in the
1.5.
base.
I think we're fine with that.
For 8 years thereafter then.
Yes.
Right.
So do a 1.5 million supplemental and 1.5 FY 25.
We're fine with that.
We are agreeable.
I'm trying to find if someone at the table will be here in 9 years to remember that, but I'm sure they can put it to good use. Trace will be around.
So we're gonna change the 25 funding to recurring, correct?
Well, we're gonna create a fund, just like was mentioned, in regards to the DDS waiting list.
Yep.
We'll be able to have accountability and track those funds as well.
Great.
That's agreeable.
Mr. Chairman, up at the top of ag on our sheet, if whoever's running the computer would just scroll that down. We have the removal of the rural fire chassis. So just wanted to talk this out with you. You all are reflecting that we do pull that one, that we remove the one time. And then you are putting back in the 6.9. I don't know that we disagree on that, but I just want some clarification. It's my understanding that the rural fire chassis program as originally introduced wasn't fully utilized. And that in order to make this program really work, that there needs to be a broadening of the qualifications for this program.
Yes, the language in the bill last year actually was very specific, that the only replacement chassis and cabs that would qualify would be for equipment that were actually lost or burned up in a fire.
Right.
We've had conversations with the secretary. There needs to be a word change in the criteria of cabin chassis and fire departments that can qualify. The statement I believe I heard was the funds from last year and this year will probably be way woefully short of what the demands truly are. I've had one rural fire department mention that their stuff's pretty old and wore out, and literally they'd hate to see it burned up in a fire, but if that's the only way they can qualify to get a new cabin chassis, that's probably going to start happening.
So, Mr. Chairman, our report from ODEP is that only about 59,000 was used from the original 6.9. So they almost have the original investment still remaining in the fund.
Yes, but just as I said just a while ago, I think you might have missed it. Secretary believes that with the change in the wording of what the
It would
purpose can
expand
be used,
utilization.
that literally 14 mil will not be enough to keep up with the demand.
Do we have language on that I could let my subcommittee chair see on what the expansion would look like?
We can present that to you. It's just broadening the use and taking away the restriction of had to be lost in a fire.
Yep. So we'll let that, I think potentially that's something that we could get to, but I want to work with my subcommittee and my subcommittee chair for them to see that language and fully understand what we're doing to expand that program before I commit to it. Where do you want to go next?
If I may interject for 1 second, just to put you all on notice somewhat so we don't abruptly get up. We do have a JCAB scheduled to be able to deliver the 45 million to emergency management at 11, and we'd like to try to keep on track for that. So we're not opposed to reconvening at some time. I don't think today would allow it, but we could reconvene on Wednesday afternoon if that's agreeable to you all. Obviously, you all can meet and see where some of the differences, as long as their agreements are not reached in those meetings. But we still have 25 minutes. We're not leaving right now, but I wanted to let you know we will be leaving here shortly, just to be able to go make sure we conduct that business. And I know you all have had to delay yours as well. So want to be respectful there.
Okay, I'm showing that we still have line items to discuss in agriculture.
Yes.
Okay, you said where do you want to go to next, but.
Yeah,
Still
no,
in ag.
what I mean is on the line items in ag.
And let me interject. Pro Tem, so at 11, so if you need to get out of here at 10:45, 10:40.
10:55 will be fine. We don't need a whole long time to get up there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So Lake Fort Gibson FFA camp.
Yeah, Lake Fort Gibson, FFA camp, the 9.5, I think that, our subcommittee took a look at that. We're just, curious why it didn't, go through through the process. We're just now, didn't hear about this until kind of midway through the session. Had some questions related to the relationship with CORE and what the lease would look like. I had a question that came up: if there is some sort of borrowing or a lien associated with with this program. And Speaker Pro Tem Hilbert, I know that you're pretty familiar with this. I think we'd like to hear some more detail.
Certainly,
Were those things not presented in the subcommittee?
they were.
They were.
So I was just curious of the detail after being presented with, if there's something we missed after being presented with the detail, our subcommittee was still not inclined to do that program.
Most of what I heard from the subcommittee was not complaints about the project. It was complaints about process. And this is where some of my conversations with some senators, private conversations, we're friends, but we have some good conversations about process, and the Senate has a process. We don't get to tell you guys how to do your process. You don't get to tell us how to do ours. And so this did go through the process and has been vetted. The Natural Resources Committee spent a lot of time interviewing FFA, and I know the state advisor for FFA also came to the chairman's office and answered a lot of questions as well. And so in terms of this project, Mr. Chairman, you probably know more about it than any other senator because we've been talking about it for almost 2 years now. When FFA camp was removed from the site that they'd been at for decades and decades and decades, we were exploring opportunities 2 years ago to try to find them a site at Lake Carl Blackwell in cooperation with OSU. But at the time that ended up not working out. The price tag on that was going to be $20 million. It was going to be a totally new campsite. And earlier this year, it was an opportunity presented itself for them to take over the lease with 25 years with a 25-year renewal at the Lake Fort Gibson site. And so we have a real opportunity this session to do that while this opportunity presents itself. In terms of the lien situation, that's really a situation with the bank that has the loan with the previous holder of the lease. And so I've talked to that bank. I've talked to FFA. That's all going to be resolved amicably, and that's all going to work itself out. But that's the opportunity we have this session, is to really do a transformative project for FFA, for future generations of FFA students forever, if we get the opportunity to put these funds there.
Representative Hilbert, I'm sorry to interject. You and I had a phone conversation briefly on this, and do respect that you all have a different process and don't want to be derogatory at all. Appreciate your perspective on this. I'm not as familiar. I was not part of the subcommittee. So was this a privately held camp? I'm not as familiar with FFA. I'm very familiar with it.
Yes.
Amazing. But can you just give me some more, like, where is it
for Gibson? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the campgrounds is called Camp Tulakogi, and what that is, it's a combination. It was I believe 2 Baptist churches, one in Tulsa, one in Muskogee. They got together and created a campsite, Tulakogi, Tulsa, Muskogee, and they leased this campsite to the FFA every summer, and this has been going on for decades and decades. And then about 3 years ago, the camp came under new leadership, and they did not want non-Christian organizations at their camp anymore. And so FFA was out, which unsurprisingly, that led to the demise of that camp, Camp Tulakogi, because it was the FFA students and the funds from FFA that really kept it going. And so for the past 3 years, the leadership at FFA, Oklahoma Ag Education, has been trying to figure out what is going to be the long-term future of camp, because they've trying to figure out what's going to be the home for these students moving forward, because this is the premier leadership event for all the FFA students every year. This is the #1 event on their calendar, is their FFA camp in the summer. And so that's why we were initially looking at OSU and a brand new campsite, and now have this opportunity with this campground, which is now essentially the previous leaseholder has essentially went under, and so the bank that had the loan with that organization currently holds it, and they have it all in writing, ready to turn this over to FFA as soon as they have funds to get the camp where it needs to be. And so that's where the state appropriation comes in, is because there are some real capital needs at this campsite, and if FFA were to just take it over as is and not receive state funds, then this is going to be essentially a money pit. But if we put the funds over there to get it fixed up where it needs to be, so they have the resources, then this can not only serve kids for generations, but also can turn a profit and be something that is truly a one-time investment from us as a state into the FFA programs.
So, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'm looking at the document that's been floating around related to the expenses associated where the 9.5 would go.
Yep.
And they kind of talk about the immediate need to restore the campgrounds and the facility to a usable condition, which is what you're talking about. We don't want it to be a money pit, and that estimated cost is $2.5 million. Then when you take a look at the midpoint needs, and then the major needs, which is an additional 72 bunk capacity, it kind of seems to me that they've kind of prioritized these. And if the first priority is the 2.5 million, which looks like quite a bit to accomplish in 25, that may very well be a really good start to being able to get this campground in a usable condition, which is actually the terms that they use on their own form.
Certainly. And so if we want to put structures in place, and I mentioned this to Senator Yak, the chairman for Natural Resources as well, if we want to run a limits bill at AG to put restrictions in place on the rest of the funds, make sure everything has been progressing as it should before releasing the dollars for the building of the cabins, I'd be totally open to that.
Well, it sounds like you've had more conversations with my subcommittee chair than I have as it relates to this. So, I mean, we can talk about the restrictions, but I mean, it seems to me that getting the facility up to a usable condition, at 2.5 seems like a more respectable or meaningful way to get this project started. And we take a look at it in the next year, depending on, how far along they've come with these projects that are on the list.
Well, I will, at the risk of quoting a senator again, who was speaking in the Natural Resources Committee, he said, listen, if we fund part of it, then we're going to be back next year saying we wasted money or we should have funded the whole thing. And so to me, I think it's important. Let's fund it and let's do it right and do it right the first time. We know inflation, things aren't getting cheaper. So if we're going to fix the camp, let's fix the camp.
I'll circle with my subcommittee chair and have those discussions and see where he and the subcommittee are at.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
So for clarity, just right now, Senate position.
We're on hold.
Fund FFA. I got you. All right.
On hold.
On hold, not to fund. Pepsi. Food, and I always get the acronym.
Food and Ag Product Center.
Ag Product Center. The center participates in most of our small businesses made in Oklahoma. They do have capital needs for some new equipment, plus also ongoing operational. It seems to me that the Senate is not in favor other than paying outright. We have the equipment listed under LCF.
I think that's the difference, if I'm seeing it correctly.
They don't have the fund unless they
Yeah,
change
it's
it.
5 million.
So you do.
Yeah, no, we
the
have,
operations.
so that's, again, we're one of those places where we agreed to that, to the FAPSI building. It's just a matter of whether we LCF or we use cash. And but speaking of, Mr. Chairman, just curious, our Senate, and most of our subcommittee chairs as it relates to LCF versus utilizing cash, the number that's been floating around, Pro Tem, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's been about $20 million for, if the project is $20 million or under, that it may make some sense just to use cash as opposed to LCF.
So let me get this straight. So from last Thursday, the position of the Senate was, we didn't want to fund anything longer than the assets live. Now it's,
No,
we don't want to fund anything less.
Mr. Chairman, I made an
than
example
20. No.
using the OETA towers. I said that again last time, the transmitters.
Right.
And I think the Speaker Pro Tem was on a text thread with the director and indicated that maybe the useful life was actually longer than 25. I don't know that I completely agree with that, but that was my point. Is I was just using that as an example, not necessarily for all the projects.
So for clarification, a couple things. One, when LCF was created last year, all of the projects were based on 20-year payback models. I think that is a good standard to have, and it's consistent. Everybody knows the parameters if there's a project funded out of LCF. LCF is funded with cash, with state resources. It's not this Ponzi scheme that I keep hearing referred to in the other chamber, or a buy now, pay later. We are funding up front, but we are self-funding our own capital projects. So it puts together a program that, with the debt service baked into each agency's base, years going forward for the next 20 years, a couple things. One, if we do have a downturn, we can suspend our payments to ourselves. There's no impact on our bond rating. And or as those payments continue to come back to the fund, we can reinvest again in new capital projects, or in time, I believe, deferred maintenance. And you and I have had this conversation. You're very sincere and want to get something done on deferred maintenance. It's a little bit different of a program than the one that you have proposed in your bill. I'm not opposed to that as well, but there's no need not to capitalize on the opportunities of LCF in the state going forward for future legislators.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. At least we're consistent in what we're saying to each other. And what I'm saying to you is that that we're in agreement that the FAPSI building needs to be done. It's just a matter of whether we use cash or we use your LCF. So we are in agreement. It's just a matter of how we do that.
House's position is LCF still consistent.
You say the House's position is LCF?
Yes. All right. What else in ag?
Well, we have the FAPSI ops.
Thought you said you agreed to that.
When did we agree to that?
I thought you just said that a while ago. I showed that you did.
I was in agreement with the FAPSI building.
Oh, you're talking about the LCF.
We're in agreement with doing the building, whether we do it with LCF or we do it with cash is still up for
For
discussion.
a total of $5 million, correct?
That's right, for a total of $5 million.
You're doing it over 20 years, we're doing it one. We can figure that out later. The operations is where we're.
Operations piece is where we're hung up. Our subcommittee is not there. Can you give me some more detail on what the operations piece is about? One-time operations. It seems to me
I'm gonna
also.
go ahead and call on the sub chair who actually was involved in that.
Okay.
During his time at OSU.
Okay.
What are you volunteering me for?
FAPSI
The operations part.
FAPSI operations.
Operation dollars. So the breakdown on all the food ingredients that they utilize and recipes for a bunch of our small businesses, but mainly the Made in Oklahoma businesses, the smaller companies that need.
Is this an
assistance.
OSU request or an ag request?
Yes.
Okay.
So this would be for like our food processors, people in the food processing business that take value added to products. And so you take raw materials and process them, and the team at the Food and Ag Product Center are there to help these small businesses all around the state to progress through that. That's the basis of what they do. you know, you have someone that's starting out making, you know, pies or something, and it's just them by themselves, or maybe one or two companies, they can call the Food and Ag Product Center and get help on nutrition labels and food safety training. If you're going to distribute food out of state or you're over a certain revenue amount, then you have to be FDA certified at your plant. And that means you have to go to 20 hours of training at the Food and Ag Product Center to be food safety certified. So these are all the things that they do, and it's really helping small businesses.
On the operations though, 2 million, do you know specifically
I do
why that would be a one-time request? That's not.
I do not.
Okay.
We can circle back to that. I don't
You
know.
know, we're just looking at a summary report from some of my analysts, and this is going to do some strategic hiring as well. And it just it seems like to me that we're hiring FTEs there, that this should be at least being considered as a recurring expense. Just curious about that.
See what I find out.
Okay. Well, while he's getting that report, we can continue to move on if you want, Mr. Chairman.
We've got 4 minutes.
Yeah, we got the inspector invasive species. You all are at 100,000. It's reflected as not an agency request. I think we're curious at where that recurring expense from the House would come
To a
from.
bill that was passed last session, the invasive species, there seems to be some heartburn with the full title I've noticed coming out of Senate discussions, but the Terry Peach Act. We have fundings, I believe, that were agreed to, and this was pulled back out. We took the name off Terry Peach, but for the invasive species, then also an inspector to help oversee the program. But we'll come to your position, that will speed things along. Yeah, it's in conservation.
So to 0.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah.
correct? 0 additional. Yeah.
Why don't we, I think we're running out of time, just call it right there.
Well, Mr. Governor, I'm sorry to just, if we might, we just have
Sure.
one more line item on the Department of Ag, and that'll give us a good cutoff when we
Perfect.
come
I just
back.
have a 5-minute close, so I just given, make sure you guys have plenty of time.
And we talked about the ag enhancement worst case we did on where we ended
Yeah,
up
there's
with.
about 4 items you're taking back, and I have to come back.
And we're good. Thank you, Governor.
5-minute close.
All right. Well, first off, thank you so much for the great dialogue. Do we know what we've agreed to and how much we've increased spending so far on the budget from last year?
So Governor, we'll certainly get with our staff and renumerate our pages, and we'll have that number for you the next time we get it.
Excellent. And then, so Secretary of Law has got with me, Pro Tem, on your question. So last year, if we take all the one-time items out of the 12.9 appropriations, the one-time ongoing obligations was at 10,758. Okay, 10,758,000. So if we go back to one-time flat budgets, we're at 10,758. And then we know that 11.3 approximately is the reoccurring revenue. If we take the tax cut, we take the 300 million out, we're at 11 billion. We still have 250 million to play with, $250 million to raise everything up and all the great things that we're talking about here. So I think that's how we get to the numbers, and you can double check me on that. I'll be happy to send them to you. 10,758 is removing all one-time items from last year, and then we can absolutely afford to do the 300 million, and then therefore we have 250 million to grow government, and then give Oklahomans, of course, Oklahomans a tax cut. If we do it the way we're doing it, I'm afraid we might already be over 250. I have no idea, but it's kind of the backward way to think about it if we're trying to get a tax cut done. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate all your efforts.
I think you have to bring your marker board next time to show that.
I'm